So now let's talk about VS Code. VS Code is called an IDE, or an Integrated Development Environment. This is where you're going to be writing your code when you're creating your Python scripts. So when you think about VS Code, basically what this is this is a piece of software that's specially designed for you to be able to write programs in almost any language. Whether you're going to be writing Python or JavaScript or C# or whatever else, this is a piece of software that allows you to write that code and has a lot of built-in tools to make it easier. Just like you would use Word in order to write a term paper or QuickBooks in order to create an invoice, basically an IDE allows you to be able to create scripts. Now, there are a number of different IDEs out there. For Silicon Dojo, we use VS Code because, frankly, darn near every coder I know uses VS Code. This is one of those products that Microsoft came out with that's just darn near amazing. Almost no complaints with it, right? You can use VS Code to write code in numerous different programming languages, not just Python, but PHP, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Node, Ruby on Rails, all kinds of different languages. So for us, when I'm trying to teach you, this means we can stay with VS Code no matter what language I'm going to be teaching you. And what's going to make life a lot easier is if we're using the same IDE when there are errors or when we need to do things. If everybody is on the same page, it makes it a lot easier for doing things like teaching you and for troubleshooting. So you can use a different IDE if you want to, if you're going to be writing Python. Again, it's important to understand that Python is simply a text file. So if you really want to, again, how I learned to code well over 20 years ago, is you can use Notepad. If you want to use Notepad and type out your Python code and save it with a .py extension, you can do that, and then from the command line you can do Python 3 and the script that you created in order to run your Python code, but you're not gonna get all the bells and whistles, or really any of the bells and whistles. You're just gonna get text. So you can write Python in any number of ways, but we use VS Code just because it makes life a hell of a lot easier. Now, if you're using Mac OS or if you're using Windows, you'll go to the VS Code webpage, and basically all you're going to do is you're going to download VS Code for your particular operating system, and then you're going to run it. That's all you need to do. If you're using Ubuntu, you will open up the Ubuntu App Store. You will search for the word code, and then basically you'll see VS Code will come up as one of the options, and you will install it there. So installing, basically downloading and installing VS Code is incredibly simple, and it is completely free. You just download it and run it. Now, one of the first things that you're going to have to do after you've downloaded and you've run VS Code is you're going to need to open the extensions icon. So there's that little square blocks over here, and this is for extensions. And for you, there'll be a recommended extension of Python. I already have this installed, but for you, you'll need to install it. This is from Microsoft. So basically, everybody uses this if you're going to be writing a Python code in VS Code, and this is going to give you a lot of functionality. So basically what you'll simply do is you'll highlight it and you'll click to install it, and this will install the extension within your VS Code environment. There are thousands or tens of thousands of different extensions out there for whatever programming language you're going to be interacting with. You may want to go through and take a look at the different extensions, but the extension that we're going to need in order to do this series of classes is the Python extension by Microsoft. And basically, this is what you're going to be looking for, and this is what you're going to be installing. Now, once you've installed the Python extension, basically you can start writing your Python code. What you should do is as soon as you start writing your code, you should save your code, basically your script, with a name with a .py extension. So this is going to tell VS Code that this is a Python script, and then VS Code can go through and it give you these nice formatting options, right? You can see print is in like light yellow, the parentheses are in bright yellow, the text that's supposed to be printed out is in, you know, this kind of whatever tan color. You'll notice if I forget to do something, right, it gives me a warning. So now the parentheses is in red and it tries to tell you that there might be a problem there. That's the kind of stuff that you're going to get from the Python extension. So if you're typing this out, you've saved as a .py file, and it's all just white or something like that, that probably means the Python extension isn't installed. The most important tool out of this, though, is once you've installed the Python extension and you have the Python interpreter installed on your system, is you're going to get this little triangle button up here. This little triangle button allows you to run your Python code from within the interpreter, right? So I simply have this little script, print hello world. I can click on the run button. What will happen is this will open the terminal window here, and then it will give me the output. So this is actually running the Python script. I'm printing out to the screen, and so it's printing out hello world. So this is what that Python extension will give you. If you have not installed the Python extension, right, you will not get this color coding, and you will not have this run button up here. Now the next thing that you should do with VS Code, you don't have to do this, but you should, is open up a workspace. What this is going to do is it's going to allow you to basically have a file explorer within VS Code, so you can flip around between all the files in your projects relatively easily. And it will also change what is called your current working directory, so that when you run your script within VS Code, when you go to write to a file or read from a file, it will go to your, basically your workspace to look for those files, and you don't have to worry about your directory structure as much as you might. So basically, we have this icon up here with these two files. We're going to click on that, and then you're going to get this. You know, you have not opened a folder, so what we're going to do is we are going to open a folder, and then it will ask you what folder you want to open. Just for me, to make my life easier, I'm just going to click on the desktop. I have all this stuff, including example.py script here, and so then I'm going to open. And now I have opened this particular workspace, right? So if I want to go through and I want to look at things such as images now, you know, that's in this workspace. If I'm trying to embed images in the script that I'm creating, I can click on those and see that. If I want to take a look at the script, so let's say I have multiple Python scripts here, I can just click on them to open them up relatively easily. And again, like I said, when I'm going to go and run a script, this will now be considered my working directory when I run this in VS Code. So if I'm writing to files or I'm reading from files, it will look for those files in this particular directory, which is the workspace. So that's why workspaces are important. So now we should look at settings. So one of the things that I'll tell you in the VS Code world is that, my golly, there are so many settings, so many settings. So we're going to go take a look at them. Basically, you go up to Code. Again, whatever operating system you're on, you'll get that. You'll click on Settings, and then you'll click on Settings, and this will get you to the settings. And so there's just gonna be a crap ton of these settings, right? For the text editors here, for the workbench, for the window, for features, for applications, the whole 9 yards. So basically all you do is you have a nice little search bar up here, and so this is where you can search for things. So things such as word or wrap. Right? So word wrap can be incredibly useful. What word wrap is when the text that you're writing goes to the end of the screen, does it keep going beyond the edge of the screen, or does it wrap around to the other side, right? So when you're writing a term paper in Word, right, and you're typing along and you're typing your sentence, and you get to the end of the page, it just wraps to the other side, wraps to the other side, wraps it. That's called word wrap. Well, by default, VS Code doesn't word wrap. Basically, when you're creating your line of code, it'll just keep going forever. Which can be a bit of a pain if you're trying to read your code. So one of the things you can do here is you can simply come and you can turn word wrap on. So when you hit the end of your page, it will simply wrap the code to the other side. It might be a little bit easier to read for you. If you're doing things like font size, so again, when I'm doing classes, I have to change font size a lot. You can type in font up here, and it will give you the font size. You can also change the font family, that type of thing. So again, just for basic things. You can even change the terminal font size, right? So when we do the terminal, and I'm showing things down, you know, at the bottom, you can change the terminal font size here, if that matters for you. And as I say, there's just a tremendous number of settings here. So just plug in things that you're searching for and see what pops up. Now the final thing with VS Code for this particular series is within VS Code you may need to change the interpreter that's used when you click on the run button, right? So basically when you install VS Code, it's going to assume you have a specific interpreter, and sometimes you can have issues where the interpreter that VS Code tries to use is not the same one that's on your operating system and everything kind of fails out in a wonky way. So anyways, if you look over here, basically there's just a number for Python, so Python 13.1. Basically, if you click on that, so if you go all the way down to that lower right-hand corner and click on that, this will give you an option for the different interpreters that are on your system. So we have a 13.13.1, we have a point 12, we have point 11, and we have point 9. So basically, depending on what you're trying to do with your code, you might need to use a different interpreter. So here, again, I want to use 13.13. I can now click on that. Down there it's 13.13, so when I hit the run button, that's the interpreter that we're going to use. So this is something I have actually seen this error on brand new fancy MacBook Pros, where you install VS Code, you go to run the Python script, it just fails for all kinds of horrible reasons. And the reason is basically that the VS Code is trying to run 3.9 interpreter. That's probably not installed on your system. So basically you just have to change the interpreter to the one that's appropriate for your system. So again, you just click on that, you click on most likely the recommended one, and then everything should be fine for you. So that's a brief overview of what I think you're going to need to understand about VS Code in order to go forward with this series of classes. VS Code is a lot like Photoshop, right? So basically, if you need to open up pictures and you need to crop the pictures and do a couple of things, Photoshop seems pretty easy. But if you're a professional graphic designer, you can take 80 hours of training just on Photoshop in order to allow you to do all kinds of amazing things. Like, that's kind of sort of like VS Code. Most of the stuff that you're going to use is only a couple of steps above basically using a word processor, and everything will work fine for you. But if you really want to dive into the weeds, there are a lot of configurations and a lot of things that you can play with. But I think this is a good basic overview for what you'll need for this particular series.